A father and daughter set out on what was supposed to be an ordinary diving trip, but neither returned. 7 years later, the secrets beneath the waves are finally starting to surface, and what his wife discovered will shock the entire town. Stay tuned as we dive deep into the mystery that has haunted a family and a community for years. The coastal town of Camden, Maine, was a place where the ocean met the sky in an endless embrace, waves crashing against jagged cliffs, seabirds wheeling in the salt-tinged breeze, and the steady pulse of the tides marking time. For the Matthews family, Camden had been more than a home. It was where memories were made, laughter echoed down quiet streets, and life felt wrapped in the gentle rhythm of the sea. But 7 years ago, that rhythm was broken forever. Sarah Matthews stood on the porch of their small cottage, wrapped in a cozy sweater against the morning chill. The faint scent of brewing coffee mingled with the crisp salt air. Her eyes lingered on the harbor, where boats bobbed gently against weathered docks and fishermen prepared for their early trips. This morning felt like any other, yet the memories it held were anything but ordinary. Her husband Mark was busy on the boat dock, double-checking his diving gear with the precision of a man who trusted his life to every detail. At 42, Mark was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-kissed skin that told stories of years beneath the sun and salt spray. His piercing blue eyes were sharp yet kind, and the smile he wore could brighten even the darkest days. To Sarah, he was the anchor of their family, steady, adventurous, and endlessly loving. Beside him was their daughter Lily, a spirited 14-year-old with wild auburn curls that escaped her ponytail and danced around her freckled face. Lily was fearless in many ways, her bright green eyes always searching for the next adventure. She adored her father and shared his love for the ocean, though sometimes Sarah worried the sea pulled too strongly on their hearts. Today was special. Mark had planned a diving trip to a remote reef a few miles offshore, a chance to share his passion with Lily, to bond beneath the waves away from the distractions of land. Sarah had mixed feelings about it, part excitement for them and part unease she couldn't shake. "You sure you don't need me to come?" she called out from the porch, her voice gentle but tinged with worry. Mark glanced up, his face lighting with a reassuring smile. "It's just a simple dive, Sarah. We'll be careful. I promise." Lily grinned, slipping on her fins. "Dad's the best diver in Camden. I'm safe with him." Sarah smiled but felt the knot tighten in her chest. The boat rocked softly as they pushed off, the shoreline shrinking behind them. The water sparkled beneath the morning sun, its depths promising secrets and wonders. Mark reviewed the dive plan carefully, his voice calm but vibrant with anticipation. "Stick close," he said. "Watch for currents. We'll explore the coral gardens and maybe spot some lobsters." Lily nodded eagerly, her heart pounding with excitement. She felt ready, more grown up with each passing moment, eager to prove herself beneath the waves. The sea embraced them as they slipped beneath the surface. Weightless and silent, they entered a world transformed. Brilliant schools of fish flickered by like living jewels, corals waved like underwater forests, and strange creatures peeked from their hiding places. Mark pointed out starfish clinging to rocks and shy octopuses curling in their dens. Lily's wide eyes took in every detail, her wonder deepening with each breath. For a time, all was perfect. But then, a faint rumble vibrated through the water, subtle but unmistakable. Lily's fingers tightened around Mark's hand. "Did you feel that?" she whispered. Mark nodded, signaling calm. "Probably just a shift in the reef or a distant boat. Nothing to worry about." Yet the current began to shift unnaturally, swirling with a strange force. Dark shadows stretched beneath the coral, forming shapes that did not belong. Mark's gaze sharpened as he spotted a narrow cave mouth, jagged and uncharted. "This isn't on the map," he muttered. Lily hesitated, her pulse quickening, but Mark's encouraging smile steadied her. Together, they swam toward the cave entrance, senses alert. Inside, the cavern was a world apart, eerie, silent, lit only by shards of sunlight filtering through cracks above. The walls were etched with strange symbols, ancient and indecipherable. Mark traced the carvings, awe mixing with caution. Suddenly, the water surged violently. A powerful current swept through the cavern, pulling at them with merciless force. Mark clutched Lily tightly, but the narrow passage offered no escape. Panic surged through Lily's chest as the darkness swallowed them. They fought desperately, but the water was overwhelming. Moments later, the surface erupted with a violent splash. Back on the boat, the engine hummed softly. The deck was empty. Masks, fins, and tanks scattered like ghosts of the dive that never ended. Mark and Lily had vanished. Sarah waited on the dock, dread curling in her stomach as minutes stretched into hours. When the Coast Guard arrived, they found the boat adrift with no sign of the two. The town of Camden was shaken. Search efforts were swift but futile. Divers scoured the depths, helicopters hovered overhead, and volunteers combed the rocky shores. Yet no trace was ever found. Sarah's life unraveled. The vibrant woman who had filled their home with warmth now moved through shadows. She raised her younger son alone, haunted by memories and silence. But even in her darkest moments, a fragile hope lingered. The hope that one day, the sea might give up its secrets and bring her family home. The morning after Mark and Lily disappeared, the sleepy coastal town of Camden was shaken awake by news that spread like wildfire through its tight-knit streets. What began as a simple father-daughter diving trip had transformed into a chilling mystery that gripped the hearts of everyone who knew the family. Sarah Matthews sat in the quiet, sunlit kitchen of their modest cottage, the familiar aroma of brewing coffee swirling around her, but it brought little comfort. Her hands trembled as she held the mug, the warmth failing to seep into the cold ache inside her chest. The phone had been ringing constantly. Neighbors, friends, reporters from neighboring towns and even distant cities, all calling with well-meaning questions and condolences. But no words could fill the void left by the sudden, inexplicable disappearance of her husband and daughter. Outside, the town stirred, but a thick cloud of worry had settled over Camden's harbor and streets. The Coast Guard was mobilized immediately. Local police officers joined forces with volunteer search teams, and families gathered to lend support wherever they could. Boats of every size pushed off into the choppy sea, cutting through gray waves as divers prepared for what would be the most exhaustive search the community had ever seen. Helicopters roared overhead, their spotlights piercing the morning fog, sweeping the surface of the water for any sign of life or wreckage. On shore, search dogs sniffed along the jagged coastline, noses pressed to the salt-stiffened rocks and tangled seaweed. The town's usual peaceful rhythm was replaced by a tense urgency, one fueled by hope and growing dread. Sarah refused to stay inside. Each day, she joined the search parties, her boots crunching on the rocky shore as she scanned the horizon, eyes searching the restless ocean for a glimpse of her family. The cold wind bit at her face, and the salty spray stung her skin, but she barely noticed. Time stretched into an agonizing slow dance, hours feeling like days, days bleeding into each other without resolution. On the boat where Mark and Lily had last been seen, their diving gear lay abandoned, a haunting reminder of the vanished pair. Tanks, masks, fins, and regulators were scattered haphazardly across the deck, as though dropped in a sudden rush. Sarah often found herself drawn to these items, running her fingers over the worn leather straps and salt-rusted metal, her mind spinning with questions. How could two experienced divers vanish without a trace? Did the ocean swallow them whole, or was there something more sinister at play? The townspeople shared her grief. Camden's community rallied around the Matthews family, their grief mixing with fierce determination. Fundraisers were held at the local church hall, with steaming casseroles and homemade pies passed around while neighbors shared stories and prayers. Candlelight vigils drew hundreds, their flickering flames reflecting in tear-streaked faces as they prayed for a miracle. Flyers with Mark and Lily's smiling photos appeared on every lamppost, store window, and community bulletin board. The hashtag Find Mark and Lily exploded across social media, drawing attention from strangers across the country who sent messages of support and solidarity. Yet, as days turned into weeks, hope began to fray at the edges. The Coast Guard's search grew more desperate, but each dive, Each sweep of the water ended without discovery. Helicopters scanned the waves until their fuel ran dry, and volunteers dragged nets along the shorelines and tidal pools with no sign of wreckage or bodies. False leads and sightings fueled brief surges of hope only to collapse into crushing disappointment. Whispers began to circulate in hushed tones. What if the ocean had not been the cause? Some speculated about foul play, rumors of jealous rivals, or a hidden darkness lurking beneath the surface. Others whispered about the uncharted cave Mark had discovered, a place that seemed too mysterious to be ignored. Could they have been pulled into something ancient and deadly? Was there a secret beneath the waves that the town wasn't ready to face? Through it all, Sarah was a portrait of stoic pain. The vibrant woman who had once filled their home with laughter now moved through her days like a ghost, her eyes distant and haunted. The weight of unanswered questions pressed down on her shoulders, threatening to crush what remained of her spirit. She found little solace in the company of others, retreating into the stillness of her home where the echoes of Mark and Lily's laughter seemed to fade further with each passing hour. Their younger son, Jack, was suddenly the center of her world, a fragile, quiet boy who understood loss in ways too heavy for his age. He watched his mother with a growing sense of responsibility, often sitting silently beside her, holding her hand during moments when the grief threatened to overwhelm. Together, they clung to small routines, a shared meal, bedtime stories, and watching the lighthouse beams sweep the darkness from their windows at night. One morning, as Sarah walked along the shoreline near the docks, her thoughts a swirling storm, she noticed something unexpected resting against the worn wooden pilings. A plain white envelope, sealed but unmarked. Hesitation gripped her as she picked it up, the paper crisp and cold in her hands. With trembling fingers, she slit the seal and unfolded the note inside. Written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting were just 3 words. Look deeper. Clues. No signature. No indication of who had left it. But the message stirred something inside Sarah. A flicker of hope mixed with fear. Was someone watching? Did they know more than they were letting on? Had the search missed something critical? Determined, Sarah brought the note to the local sheriff, a kind man named Tom Henderson who had led the initial investigations. Tom frowned thoughtfully as he read the message. "We'll check every angle, Sarah," he promised, his voice steady. "If there's something hidden, we'll find it." But as days passed, the mystery deepened. New clues surfaced only to lead to dead ends. The diving equipment showed no signs of damage. The boat was intact, with no indication of foul play or malfunction. And the cave Mark had mentioned was explored by a specialized team, but they found nothing unusual, only eerie carvings and unstable rock formations. Meanwhile, Sarah's world became a battleground of hope and despair. At night, when the house was quiet and shadows stretched long across the walls, she often sat by the window, staring out at the endless horizon. Her mind replayed every moment. Mark's reassuring smile, Lily's excited chatter, the feel of their hands slipping beneath the water. She whispered into the darkness, a prayer or perhaps a plea. "Come back to me. Come back home." The community continued to stand behind her, their support unwavering. But as time stretched on, the story of the Matthews family began to slip from headlines and social media feeds. The world moved forward, but Sarah remained trapped in the waiting for answers, waiting for a miracle, waiting for the sea to give back what it had taken. Yet even in the thick fog of uncertainty, Sarah refused to surrender. Every sunrise was a reminder that the search was far from over, and that beneath the waves, somewhere hidden from view, the truth waited to be uncovered. The weeks following the disappearance stretched endlessly, a relentless blur of search efforts and heartache, yet the sea remained silent. Sarah Matthews found herself caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. Grief, anger, hope, and fear swirling within her like a tempest. Every waking moment was consumed by thoughts of Mark and Lily, every quiet second a tormenting reminder of their absence. She spent hours poring over nautical charts, dive logs, and news reports, desperate to uncover any detail that might have been missed. She reached out to divers, marine experts, and anyone who had been near the reef on that fateful day, hoping for answers. Friends and neighbors offered their condolences and support, but Sarah felt increasingly isolated, like she was trapped in a nightmare that no one else could see or understand. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of orange and purple, a knock at her door broke the silence. Sarah opened it to find a man standing on the porch, mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair, eyes sharp yet kind, and a weather-beaten face that told of years spent at sea. He introduced himself as Dr. Elias Warren, a marine archaeologist who specialized in uncovering shipwrecks and exploring underwater cave systems along the New England coast. "I've been following your story," Elias said gently. "I believe the answer to what happened to Mark and Lily lies beneath Camden's waters. I want to help." Though hesitant, Sarah felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps this man could see what she could not, the hidden depths of the ocean, and the secrets it might be keeping. After a long moment of silence, she nodded, agreeing to accompany him on a dive near the reef Mark had intended to explore. The following morning, the harbor was shrouded in mist as Sarah and Elias set out on a small research boat. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the unmistakable scent of salt and seaweed. Elias spoke softly about the ocean's mysteries, the way currents shifted beneath the waves, how hidden caverns and tunnels formed over centuries, sculpted by the patient hands of time. He believed the narrow cave that Mark and Lily had entered might be far more complex than anyone had realized. A natural labyrinth, or perhaps a trap, leading into deeper underwater systems still uncharted. Sarah's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination as they prepared to dive. The weight of the unknown pressed down on her, but beneath it was a fierce resolve to find her family, to uncover the truth, no matter how difficult. As they slipped beneath the water's surface, the world transformed. The sunlight fractured into dancing patterns on the ocean floor, schools of fish shimmered like liquid rainbows, and coral formations created a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. Elias pointed out familiar landmarks, the coral gardens, the twisted roots of kelp, the jagged entrance of the cave. Together, they swam closer, their flashlights cutting through the shadowed water, illuminating the ancient carvings etched into the stone walls, mysterious symbols that seemed to pulse with untold stories. Suddenly, Elias halted. His light revealed a narrow tunnel partially concealed behind a curtain of swaying seaweed. "This wasn't on any map," he whispered. "It might be the key." Sarah's pulse quickened as they entered the tunnel. The water pressure shifted, currents tugged insistently, and the rocky passage twisted and turned deeper into the abyss. Their breaths came steady through their regulators, but the weight of the unknown pressed heavy on their minds. At last, they reached the end of the passage and discovered a small air pocket, a hidden chamber where the water gave way to breathable air. The cavern was dim, filled with the faint scent of salt and damp earth. It felt like a secret sanctuary beneath the waves. Inside, scattered belongings lay half-buried in the sand. A child's scarf, faded and delicate, a water bottle, cracked but intact, and a worn photograph of Mark and Lily, smiling brightly, frozen in a moment of happiness. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as the reality hit her with crushing force. They had been here. They had reached this secret refuge, this hidden place of safety. But how had they vanished from a chamber with air? What had happened after? The discovery sparked a fragile flame of hope in Sarah's heart, tempered by 1,000 questions. If Mark and Lily had found this chamber, maybe they had survived longer than anyone had thought possible. Maybe they had left behind clues, signs of life, messages meant to guide rescuers to them. Determined to uncover more, Sarah and Elias expanded their exploration, diving deeper into the labyrinthine cave system. Each new chamber told a story. Footprints in the sediment spoke of cautious steps. A makeshift shelter fashioned from driftwood and seaweed whispered of desperate attempts at survival. And most precious of all, a journal half filled with Lily's neat handwriting, its pages water-stained but legible. Sarah clung to the journal as if it were a lifeline. As she turned each page, she was drawn into Lily's world. Days spent hiding from a lurking threat beneath the waves. Nights filled with whispered prayers, flickers of hope, and dreams of rescue. Lily's words were raw and honest, capturing fear, courage, and the fierce love between a father and daughter fighting to stay alive. Back on shore, the news of the new findings reignited the community's spirit. Volunteers poured into Camden, joining search parties with renewed vigor. Social media buzzed with updates and theories. Reporters descended upon the town, eager to share the latest chapter of this harrowing tale. Yet even as hope blossomed, shadows lengthened. Unexplained noises echoed from the caves at night, low moans that seemed to rise from the depths, carried by the wind to those who dared listen. Fishermen reported strange lights beneath the water, glowing orbs that drifted silently like ghostly lanterns. Rumors began to spread of a guardian or a monster, a mysterious presence that protected the caves and its secrets. Sarah knew, deep down, that the truth was far more complicated than anyone imagined. The ocean held mysteries older than the town itself, and unlocking them would mean facing fears she had never dared confront. Night after night, Sarah found herself standing at the water's edge, staring into the dark expanse of the sea. The waves lapped gently at her feet, whispering secrets only the ocean knew. Somewhere beneath those restless tides lay answers, the fate of her husband and daughter, the reason for their disappearance, and perhaps a way to bring them home. She whispered a prayer into the night air, her voice trembling but resolute. "Please, Mark, please, Lily, come back to me." The morning after the storm felt oddly still. The heavy rain had washed the streets clean, and the air smelled of wet pavement and pine. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The events of the past few weeks were twisting together in her mind like a tangled fishing line. Matthew's sudden disappearance 7 years ago, the unexpected sighting by a neighbor 2 weeks ago, and the strange phone call from a blocked number that had ended in silence. She barely noticed the knock at the door at first. It was soft, hesitant, like someone wasn't sure they should even be there. When she opened it, she found a thin, pale young man standing awkwardly, holding a large, weather-beaten envelope. His hair was messy and damp from the fog outside, and his eyes darted nervously to the ground. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked in a voice that cracked slightly. "Yes," she replied, cautious. "This is for you. He told me to give it to you if anything ever happened to him." Emily's breath caught. "He?" The young man hesitated, then added quietly, "Matthew Carter." Her knees almost buckled. She steadied herself against the doorframe, eyes fixed on the envelope as though it might vanish if she blinked. "Where did you?" But before she could finish, the man stepped back. "I can't. I'm sorry." And then he walked quickly down the driveway and disappeared into the mist. Emily stood frozen for several seconds before she shut the door and locked it. Her hands trembled as she set the envelope on the table. The paper was yellowed, the corners frayed. Across the front, in Matthew's neat handwriting, was her name, Emily Carter. She sat down, staring at it for what felt like forever. Her instinct told her that opening it could change everything, but she also feared what it might reveal. Finally, she tore it open. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and a small brass key. The paper smelled faintly of salt and oil, like it had been stored somewhere damp for years. She unfolded it slowly, her eyes scanning Matthew's words. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't come back the way I planned. You'll want answers, and I wish I could give them to you all at once. But it's not safe to put everything in writing. There are people who might be watching, even now." Her hands tightened around the paper. "Go to the old cabin on Ridgewater Lake. You'll find something hidden under the floorboards near the fireplace. Don't trust anyone, not even the ones who say they're helping you. I'll explain everything, if we ever meet again." Matthew. Emily's mind spun. Ridgewater Lake was the place where Matthew used to take her fishing during the first years of their marriage. It was remote, more than 2 hours away, and no one had been there in years. The brass key in her palm suddenly felt heavy, almost warm. She turned it over, noticing faint initials scratched into the side. MC. For the first time in years, she felt something other than grief or confusion. She felt a surge of purpose. Matthew was out there, somewhere, but the letter's warning rang in her ears. Don't trust anyone. Emily knew she couldn't just pack up and leave without telling someone. If something went wrong, she needed a trail. She thought of Detective Harris, the officer who had handled Matthew's disappearance years ago. He had been persistent even when the case went cold. But could she trust him now? She called him anyway. "Detective, it's Emily Carter. Something happened. I got a letter." Within 30 minutes, Harris was at her kitchen table, scanning the page with furrowed brows. He tapped the brass key against his palm. "This changes things. But Emily, if this letter is real, it also means that someone's been keeping an eye on you for a long time." She shivered. "The man who brought it, he just vanished into the fog. I didn't get his name." "Could have been a courier," Harris muttered, "or someone Matthew trusted. Either way, Ridgewater Lake isn't just a fishing spot anymore. We need to go carefully." Emily hesitated. "The letter said not to trust anyone. That includes you." Harris met her eyes. "Fair enough. I'll tell you what, we go together, but if you get even the slightest bad feeling about me, you walk away. Deal?" She nodded slowly. "Deal." The drive to Ridgewater Lake was tense and silent at first. Harris kept his eyes on the winding road while Emily clutched the envelope in her lap. Every turn in the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees pressing closer. When they finally pulled up to the old cabin, Emily's heart sank. It looked abandoned, windows clouded with dust, the wooden porch sagging under years of neglect. But as she stepped onto the creaking boards, she noticed something strange. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and something metallic. Harris shone a flashlight around. "Looks like no one's been here in a long time," he said. Emily moved to the fireplace, her knees almost buckling with anticipation. She ran her hands along the floorboards until she found one that felt loose. With Harris's help, she pried it open. Inside was a small metal box, no bigger than a shoebox. Emily's pulse raced as she slid the brass key into the lock. Clicked open. She lifted the lid. Inside were several items: a stack of faded photographs, a bundle of cash wrapped in twine, and a sealed manila envelope labeled in Matthew's handwriting, "For Emily. Only when you're ready." Her hands shook as she reached for it, but Harris stopped her. "Emily, before you open that, look at this." He pointed to one of the photographs. It was Matthew, standing next to a man Emily didn't recognize. They were on a boat, and in the background was the unmistakable skyline of a city halfway across the world, Hong Kong. Emily's breath caught. Matthew had never been to Hong Kong. She stared at the envelope in her hands. Whatever was inside might finally answer the question that had haunted her for 7 years. But it could also destroy everything she thought she knew about her husband. With a deep breath, she began to tear it open, and then, from outside, came the crunch of footsteps on the gravel. The day after the confrontation with Martin's old friend, the air in the Carmichael household felt heavy, almost unbreathable. The walls seemed to press inward, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Helen barely slept, tossing in bed as her mind replayed the last few days like a sinister loop she couldn't turn off. Morning light seeped in through the curtains, cold and pale, as if even the sun was wary of touching this family. Martin sat at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee without drinking it. His hands were clasped so tightly around the mug that his knuckles turned white. Helen, standing by the counter, gripped the edge of the marble so hard her nails left faint marks in the wood beneath. They didn't speak, not yet. The silence was an uninvited guest at the table, growing louder with each passing second. Finally, Helen broke it. "Martin," she said softly, "I need the whole truth. No more holding back, no more pieces. Every word, every detail." He glanced up at her, his eyes bloodshot and tired, but not from lack of sleep. This was the exhaustion of a man who had been running from something for too long. Slowly, he nodded. "You're right," he said, his voice rough. "You deserve to know everything." Martin began with a name Helen had never heard before: Eleanor Bryce. She had been a marine biologist, young, brilliant, and determined to make groundbreaking discoveries. Martin had met her during one of his deep-sea expeditions years before he met Helen. Their friendship had quickly become something deeper. Though Martin swore it was never romantic, his voice trembled as he spoke, and Helen knew there was more to the story. They had been working on a research project off the coast, mapping underwater cave systems. During one particularly dangerous dive, an accident occurred. The currents had shifted unexpectedly, trapping them in an underwater chamber with dwindling oxygen. Eleanor didn't make it out. Martin had escaped, but not without scars, both visible and invisible. It wasn't just the guilt, Martin admitted, his gaze fixed on the table. Eleanor had been carrying something with her, a journal. It was filled with coordinates, sketches, and notes, things I didn't understand at first, but someone else did. He explained that after Eleanor's death, mysterious people began contacting him, offering money, then threatening him. They wanted the journal, but Martin had hidden it, convinced that whatever was in those pages was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. Years later, when he took that diving trip with their daughter, he wasn't going for leisure. He had learned that part of Eleanor's mapped coordinates pointed to something hidden in a submerged cave, something that could change everything. He didn't elaborate on what it was, but Helen could see in his eyes that it was more than just treasure. Helen's breath caught. "So you weren't just spending time with her?" "I was," Martin said quickly, "but I was also trying to finish what Eleanor started. And I thought, stupidly, that bringing her along would keep me safe. Safe." The word felt like a punch to Helen's chest. Martin had risked their daughter's life for his own sense of security. He went on. The trip had been going well until, during the dive, they found it. An ancient artifact wedged deep within a coral formation. It looked ceremonial, with strange carvings that seemed almost alive in the beam of their underwater lights. But the moment Martin touched it, something went wrong. The currents turned violent, the visibility dropped to zero, and he lost his grip on their daughter's hand. When he surfaced, she was gone. The Coast Guard searched for days. Martin never told them about the artifact. He claimed she had simply gotten caught in a riptide. Helen felt her heart race as the puzzle pieces fell into place. "So all these years, you've been hiding this? Hiding the real reason she vanished?" Martin's voice cracked. "Yes." Tears welled in Helen's eyes, not just from grief, but from rage. "You let me mourn her thinking it was an accident. When you..." A sudden, heavy knock on the front door interrupted her. Both of them froze. The knock came again, slower this time, more deliberate. Martin stood, exchanging a quick glance with Helen before opening the door. A tall man in a dark coat stepped inside without asking. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp and calculating. He carried a waterproof case in one hand. "You've been difficult to find, Martin," the man said, his voice low and gravelly. "But I'm glad we're finally having this conversation." He placed the case on the table and unlatched it. Inside was the artifact Martin had described, its surface glistening as if wet, the carvings shifting subtly when viewed from different angles. Helen instinctively took a step back. "We found her," the man said calmly, "but she's not exactly the same." Helen's world tilted. "Where is she?" she demanded. The man's gaze didn't waver. "That's complicated. She's alive. But if you want to see her, you'll need to come with me now. Both of you." The drive that followed was silent except for the low hum of the engine. The man refused to answer most of Helen's questions, and Martin seemed too stunned to speak. They eventually arrived at an isolated research facility near the coast, its exterior weathered by years of salt and wind. Inside, the corridors smelled faintly of iodine and metal. The man led them to a large room with a glass observation wall. Beyond the glass was a massive saltwater tank, its waters glowing faintly under dim blue lights. Helen's breath caught when she saw her daughter. She was floating just beneath the surface, her eyes closed as if asleep. Her hair drifted like seaweed around her face, and her skin seemed slightly paler, her movements unnaturally fluid, almost too graceful for a human. She was found in an underwater cave near the coordinates in Eleanor's journal, the man explained. "We don't know how she survived, but her body adapted. She can breathe underwater." And she's not aging like a normal human. Helen pressed her hand against the glass, tears blurring her vision. Her daughter's eyes fluttered open, and for a brief, haunting moment, Helen saw recognition. Then, the girl swam deeper into the tank, disappearing into the shadows. The man's voice was calm but firm. She can't leave this place, not yet. If she does, what's in her will kill her. And maybe more. Helen turned to Martin, her mind spinning with questions, anger, and hope. For the first time in years, they were united in one thought: getting their daughter back no matter the cost. And in that dimly lit room, surrounded by secrets older than they could comprehend, Helen realized something chilling. Finding her daughter was only the beginning. The real battle had just begun.